When you think of basketball in LA, the first team that usually comes to mind is the Los Angeles Lakers. And how can they not? With 17 championships under their belt, it's almost disrespectful if you don't mention them and basketball in the same sentence. With all of LA's glitz and glamour, it only makes sense to have a team like the Lakers help represent that. But unfortunately for all you Laker fans out there, this video isn't about them. It's all about their little brother, the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that I believe may be the favorites to win it all next season. And do you know why? Well, let me show you. Cursed franchises. We've seen that phrase be thrown around time after time in the NBA, to teams like the Sacramento Kings, the New York Knicks, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and especially the Los Angeles Clippers. Since their arrival to Los Angeles back in 1984, the Clippers have always took the backseat when it came to LA basketball. And it's not because they were the Clippers, but because they were coming into a town where a team in the same sport had already won 8 championships and have gained the majority of the LA fan base. So for a Clippers, a new team that had no titles or history come to LA and say they were the Lakers' new rival was just ridiculous. And don't get me wrong, the Clippers did have their fair share of seasons where they looked like the better team in LA, but that only lasted for a few months where they would find themselves blowing it in playoffs as usual. Which was a shame considering that their big brother Lakers were winning chip after chip even in eras where the so-called Clippers were considered the better team. But this year, things may actually look to play out differently. With guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George coming back 100% healthy and adding a guy like John Wall on the team, how can things not look bright for the supposed second best team in LA? And heck, we haven't even mentioned returning guys like Reggie Jackson, Marcus Morris, Terrence Mann, Norman Powell, Luke Kennard, and Ivica Zubac. Guys that pretty much give the Clippers the deepest roster in the league. From elite two-way wings to superior three-point shooting and great perimeter defending, this team was for sure created to compete for titles. And if that doesn't convince you, just think to yourself. Your team's best third defender is going to have to defend John Wall, a player that can not only facilitate but also give you a bucket when you need it most. And I know many of you guys may be saying that John Wall isn't that guy anymore and that he's just another washed up player looking for that one last final contract, but you guys need to understand something. John Wall is yet to be done. In the last season he played with the Rockets, he was still able to average 20.7 points per game and 8.7 assists per game, all while shooting nearly 50% from the field. And in my opinion, if the Rockets didn't decide to sit him out last season, there's no doubt in my mind that Wall would have had an all-star season. But unfortunately for him, things didn't work out that way. The Rockets decided to sit him out and focus on developing their young core instead, which isn't a bad thing, but now John Wall's on the Clippers, and his role isn't to be the guy anymore. His role now is to facilitate plays for his teammates, which we all know John Wall can do easily. But besides Wall, you have guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, two players that we all know can easily take over games when needed. Whether that's through defense or offense, these two guys can do it all at an elite level. And I know there's a lot of talk regarding Paul George saying he always chokes in the big moments and that he's not reliable when needed most, but you gotta understand, these past few playoffs George has not averaged lower than 20 points per game. And yes, he has had some questionable plays throughout his playoff runs, but those are just little mistakes I know Paul George can easily overcome. So to say that Paul George isn't reliable is just ridiculous, and I'm pretty sure if all 29 teams had the chance to have a guy like Paul George on their team, they would take him, no questions asked. And speaking about players that any team would love to have on their team, you can't forget about the claw himself, Kawhi Leonard, a player that we've seen to be the best when it comes to winning a championship. Whether you need a stop or a quick bucket, Kawhi Leonard is your best bet to get it done. But besides their two-way stars, the Clippers have multiple 3-and-D guys that can easily provide their stars a helping hand when they need it most. With guys like Norman Powell and Robert Covington joining the team just last season in a questionable trade, the Clippers have elevated their wings with two top-of-the-line snipers that will easily rise their makes from threes this season, which is a huge plus considering that Clippers already have players like Luke Kennard who led the league in three-point percentage just last year. So having guys like Norman Powell and Robert Covington on their team is just another advantage. And for me, what really makes this team special is that anybody on their team has the capability to go on streaky stretches and win games solely. We've seen it time after time with guys like Reggie, Morris, Kennard, and Mann to name a few. Guys that can easily go on hot stretches and get you a win. Not to mention, this team is a defensive coach's dream because not only are their starters defensive junkies but also their bench. The Clippers' depth is unbelievable. It's going to be interesting to see just how Ty Lue runs them this season. Now granted, the Los Angeles Clippers need to be 100% healthy this year for things to work. But as we've seen with seasons prior, the Clippers have had their fair share of injuries that have ruined their chances of winning a title. We've seen it these two past seasons with Kawhi experiencing a season-ending injury that cost him the 2021 playoffs and the entire 2022 season, and even Paul George suffered from injuries as well, which cost him more than half of the 2022 season. But even with missing both Kawhi and Paul George, the Clippers were still able to be a dominant force in the league, being top 10 in defensive rating and top 2 in 3-point percentage. And if that wasn't impressive enough, they were also top 5 in clutch offense that season, without having their both superstar players in the lineup. And just imagine how good they would have been if they had both of those guys on their team. On paper, this Clipper team is stacked, but unfortunately for the Clippers, championships aren't won on paper, they're won on the court. But if this team is able to keep things 100%, there's no doubt in my mind they have a chance to win it all. This Clipper team is easily the most talented team ever assembled in Clipper franchise history, and yes, I do believe this team is better than the Lob City Clippers. And that's no knock on the Lob City Clippers, but this team just seems to be better equipped, if I could say. But hey, I could be wrong. Only time will tell. For all I know, this team may find a bump in the road and will once again find their chances from winning it all, proving that the curse is still in full effect. Hey guys, thanks again for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have any thoughts, please feel free to share them in the comments down below. And also, if you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. And as always guys, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.